So to begin the session, I'll just invite Gurcharan and of course Ashok on here next to the book to launch the book.
So the first thing to say is that I enjoyed Ashok's book. It's an easy read. And Ashok has spent a lifetime, an enviable lifetime amongst books, having been executive editor of Vikas Publishing House, you know, during the days of the license Raj. He has been vice president of Macmillan India. He was publishing director of UBS Publishers. He's been executive director and publisher of the India Today Book Club and Books Today, as well as the chief executive and publisher of HarperCollins in India. And currently, he's the chief executive of Hay House Publishers India. So what is this publishing honcho doing, writing a book? That's the first question.
I must honestly admit I'm not really a writer like most of the others out here are. I'm basically a publisher. I know nothing else but publishing, and I just happen to now dabble into writing also. So that's the answer I can give. But I'm not really a writer. It doesn't come to me smoothly as it comes to a lot of authors that you come across.
Well, I think you prove the old adage that there's a novel inside all of us. And we shouldn't be afraid of working on it and writing it. The book that Ashok has written is a story of 5 childhood friends, and 4 of them meet after 50 years, and they go back into their past. They all went to St. Edward's School, where, believe it or not, this is in Shimla, where both Ashok and I were also educated, I after partition. And unfortunately for me, I grew up and had to undo my St. Edward's education by going and studying Sanskrit at Harvard. But Ashok, seriously now, let's talk about your book and tell us first of all what this book is all about, and then we can raise, and then I'll raise some questions to you, some philosophical questions which are raised by your book.
You know, after I finished my memoirs, which is Scrapbook of Memories, I was thinking what next. And one of the influences on me has been of writers like Isabel Allende, who in books like Daughters of Fortune or Paula and others, she mixes up the history, contemporary history of her country or of Latin America into her work of fiction or into her daughter's life. So I thought, maybe, having been born and brought up after the partition of the country, maybe I could also try and do that. And I had a story to tell of these five
friends.
five friends and of these contemporary scenes in both Pakistan and India. So the novel runs on parallel platforms right from 1947 onwards till the death of Mrs. Gandhi and the assassination of Bhutto and the emergence of Rajiv Gandhi here and Benazir there and much beyond that.
What I found interesting are the questions that this book raises. The contemporary history we are familiar with. You tell it well as a part of the story. The questions are the big questions that you raise. For example, what makes for happiness? So I'm going to put you on the spot and tell us what makes for happiness.
Well, for me, which I mentioned in the book, happiness is the quality of sour turnips. It's basically the satisfaction, internal satisfaction that you get, which is much more important. Everybody seems to be happy, but few are satisfied. So for me, it's the satisfaction that is much more important than just happiness of a person.
So what is the difference between satisfaction and happiness?
Internally and externally. You may be happy externally, but internally you may not be. But satisfaction is always internally also, because you are doing what you want to do and it's giving you the satisfaction. For me, that is much more important.
So in other words, satisfaction is that you already know what you want, and when you get it, you feel satisfied.
Well, not always, but even attempting to do something and not succeeding is also satisfying, because you have at least attempted it. You have at least gone into it, ventured into it, you know, because failures can also be very, very beautiful.
Yeah. The key thing is to want something.
Want something and do it, whether you can achieve it or not, because there's no such thing as failure. Either it's a rewarding experience if it doesn't work out, or it's an enriching experience if it works out.
Well, you know, there are too many people in the world who don't know actually what they want. I mean, I think this is a serious question, because not everyone is Mozart, who was born at the age of 3. He knew that he was going to be a great musical composer and a genius. Most of us sort of go through life, we sort of stumble through life, and some of us are lucky to find something that we really want. Most of us don't know what we really want. And I've always felt that the purpose of education, the job of our parents, the job of our teachers, is to expose us to many things so that we can find something that we really want.
You know, want also changes as you grow in life.
Yeah.
Grow, I mean age-wise. What may be relevant to you, say 20 years back, that want may not be relevant today. But it was relevant at that time, and it was an experience of its own type. So want keeps on changing, and it should keep on changing, because change is the only consistent thing in life.
Yeah, but you know, if you, a lot of people, surveys show that a vast majority of the people on the earth are working, doing things that they don't like. And there are very few who are really lucky, who really are, they know what they want and they're doing what they want.
I think I was one of those lucky ones, Gurcharan, who knew what he wanted and he did it succeeded, failed.
That's
went
why
through it.
there's a restaurant chain called Thank God It's Friday.
Yeah, absolutely.
TGIF.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I say, thank God, it's good every day.
So, another question that you raise here is really about the nature of friendship. Because you have these 4 friends who meet after, 50 years.
Yeah.
And, I mean, again, something rare. How many of us have those kind of friendships where we meet after 50 years and connect?
Gurcharan, that's a small town boy writing. You know, the smaller the place, narrower is the mentality of the people. Now, I was born and brought up in a small place like Shimla, which was a small town. It was not even a city like it is today. So it's the value
But a very
system.
cosmopolitan
It
small
was.
town.
That is the warmth of the place.
It was the capital of the British
Absolutely.
Empire.
Absolutely.
Which stretched, the viceroy was in charge from Aden to Burma.
Yeah, but the fact is the people were just small people. Small, I don't mean from any other point of view. It's just that, you know, it was a close-knit society. Who was who? Like, I remember being slapped by my neighbor because I was not good in studies. And it's a part of one of the scenes in the book. And she slapped me. She had the right to. And I dare not object. My parents dare not object. And they said, she's done the right thing. So it's the love, the warmth that you got from them, the love and warmth you got from your teachers, neighbors, friends, everything. It didn't matter whether from which nationality you came from, which caste you came from. Everybody joined into everybody's life. It was a part of that.
So you think that accounts for the quality of friendship that people like Vijay Thakur experience in your novel?
Oh, absolutely.
That it was friendship. I mean, it's a gift. And it's also got to be, you have to work at it, you know.
You know, you use the word gift. I would say during those days, it was natural. Today, it is a gift. I was talking to my author, Anupam Kher, the film actor once, and he told me, he says, a boy growing up in the city is looking at figures. A boy growing up in a town is looking at values. I think that is the answer to this. Values and figures, that is the dependence. It makes a lot of difference. For me, you know, those friends are still there.
Yeah.
Those Shimlaites are still there. Those people, they may have gone abroad, they may be settled in various cities now, but for me, they're still very, very important part of my life, as I am of theirs.
Well, I think your book reminds us, really, how precious. Aristotle wrote wonderfully about friendship.
Yeah,
The Greeks call it philia, the love between friends. And in this cosmopolitan world, I mean, Jaipur now is transformed also.
Yeah.
And we live these anonymous lives. And these friendships that you describe, somebody like Vijay Thakur, how much of Vijay Thakur is inside you?
Well, you know I've had a soft corner for Vijay Thakur, but it's not that. Every novel that you write, you also have done that, many others have. There's a part of you in it. In my case, I'm a part or small part in every protagonist out here.
Yeah.
You know, Vijay Thakur more. For example, my publisher Ranjana feels I've been very unfair to Balbir Singh, you know. But that's the way, I didn't plan it that way. It was just, it came along and I thought it will be a good one. Everybody can't be a goody-goody person. Somebody has to do something and be natural. That's what we were taught. That's what I have experienced myself. So part of me is there in everyone.
Well, you know, the greatest statement about that was made by Flaubert.
Yeah.
Perhaps my favorite novel, Madame Bovary. Any of you who have not read Madame Bovary, that's a book. That, of course, and Anna Karenina.
Yeah.
But Madame Flaubert was asked about how much. He says they were asking about Madame Bovary and who was he modeling Madame Bovary after. And he said, I am Madame Bovary. So that actually is a very profound statement about a writer and a character that a writer creates. There's an interesting point you make in the book about Punjabis, that two Punjabis meet and in the first 3 minutes they try to figure out how they are related to each other. And I'm reminded of, this is not just true of Punjabis,
It's of everyone.
but
Yeah.
for all Indians,
Yeah.
that I had a German friend who, in my previous avatar, I used to work for Procter and Gamble. So this fellow used to be the head of the China business of Procter and Gamble. And he'd fly from Hong Kong to Frankfurt first class. And he says that the first class was filled with Germans. But there would always be 2 Indians who would arrive in the first class. And the Germans would not be talking to each other. They'd all be reading their newspaper. And they'd all be looking straight, not daring to look at their neighbor. And these two Indians, in the first 5 minutes, they had worked out how they were related to each other. Yeah. And he said, you know, I can't believe it. A country of 1.3 billion people, you mean you're all related to each other? And I suppose it's partly a function, I mean, being facetious, but partly a function of how that elite society is so small. Yeah. In India. That writer, O. Henry, wrote a book about New York called The 400 and another book called The 4 Million. And one was about the society, which was 400 families, and the other one was the 4. Anyway, the other issue you raise, Ashok, is identity. Now, that's a big subject of today. The issue of whether it's our caste, whether it's our religion, whether it's our school, what identifies us, and what identified you in Rasulpur?
Well, Rasulpur was just a fictitious village. But identity for me is very important. And I don't know why this has become such an important subject today. In fact, a part of the reason for my writing this book was because when I was brought up, I wasn't told, oh, he's a Hindu and he's a Sikh and he's a Christian and he's a Muslim. We had all friends, in fact, even in my family, we have got Muslims married to Hindus. In our family, even today, the eldest son is a Sikh and a turban Sikh, where even trimming of beards is not allowed. So for me, this was a very important subject. And as we are going along, as we have all seen what is happening in the nation today, the state of the nation, we are just heading out of that. We are flying out of that, which is very, very sad. And that is one of the reasons I had to establish the Rasulpur, where Muslims, Sikhs, Brahmins, Hindus, Christians, and even a Parsi couple is there, you know. Yeah. But it is very, very important for me to live that
and
life.
That, I think, is a very important point you're making. And Naipaul makes this point again and again, that, you know, part of modernity, part of being modern is to recognize that we have multiple identities. That you are a Hindu, you are a father, you are a publisher, you are a writer, you are a grandfather, and no identity should trump the other identities in a way that it does with a fundamentalist. And unfortunately, you're right, it's the whole world. It's America first. It is...
I agree with you, but to me, America does not matter. To me, at the moment, I'm more concerned with my own country, with my own people, with my own systems out here, you know. I was brought up at a certain time when Nehru was proclaiming his policy and his vision for the growth of the country, and we were all brought up at a certain age, like most of us, on East European literature. But today, when I see what is happening and the divide that is coming in, that really pains me, and that's what I've tried to project in this second half of the book.
Well, I think one of the things that I liked about your book was nature. You almost really, it's the music, in that sense you're an interesting environmentalist because you almost see music in nature.
Yeah, you know, because when you're brought up, born and brought up in the hills, for example, you know, there are all sorts of terrain is very different. Whether it's the flow of the streams, the rivers, the breeze against the different types and species of trees, whether it's fruit trees, whether it's just deodars or pine. For me, everything is creating music. And the most beautiful sight, which I've also written about, is the weeping willows in the breeze. You have to just stand there and see what happens to a weeping willow when the breeze strikes against it. For me, it's, you know, if you're listening to Beethoven or you're listening to that, there is a connect between the two. And that's what I've described in the book also.
Of course, no novel is complete without love and sex. And you certainly have some of that as well. Maybe not enough, but you do you want to say something?
Yeah, well,
is there something that you can say about that has not been said before?
Well, don't kill me for that, but my way of looking, there's no sex in it as such. What I've described is a man-woman relationship. The difference between having sex and making love. For me, they are two different, very, very different things. And there is a statement which some have already told me it's a very sweeping statement, but I've clarified it's not sweeping, it's not a flippant statement, where I've said that I've yet to come across a couple who have been faithful to each other.
Wow.
I've said that, not one.
Not
I have.
couple.
At some phase of your life, you have been unfaithful and admit it to yourself. Why do we make so much out of sex? It's not that great to be made out of. If you want to talk about it, talk about making love, whichever way you want to.
Well, I don't want to advertise my next book, but that's the question that I try to answer. So we won't go any further. I think we have...
We've still got 5 minutes.
We still have 5 minutes?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, we can discuss about sex and love too, but there's a good scene that you have in this book, a scene of violence, which relates to the 1984 riots. Why don't we talk about that to give the audience really a full flavor?
You see, 1984 riots, I was in Delhi at that time, and it left a deep impact, a damage to my psyche, because I witnessed it all. And I've described that scene. I've described, of course, people going to the Golden Temple after the army had gone out, and what the scene was, very, very sad and all. But this 1984 scene where the Sikh boy was, you know, just killed with petrol tire around him. Now that for me, I have still not gotten over it. It's 33 years now, 34 years, whatever it is. I've still not gotten over it. And I had to describe the scene come what may. I wanted to do it in my previous book, Scrapbook of Memories. It didn't fit into there. But for me, that is still there.
So describe it.
Well, I think readers should see it, read it for themselves and understand and feel it, because you have to not only read that scene, though I say it myself, I think you have to feel that scene. That whole scenario of 1984 for the 3 days when life in Delhi had come to a standstill. We saw it all, we witnessed it, we went through it, and I think for me that is still a very, very important part of my life which I've still not gotten over it. And I don't think I want to describe it because it's quite painful. I could have read it out, but I think let the readers read it for themselves and feel that. And please do not, if you saw that scene, do never forget that. 84 is something, don't get your anger or leave your anger away for 84 riots.
Well, you know, you have this lovely village, Rasulpur, and you have the relationships between these idyllic relationships between the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, all the different communities. And I guess the question is that the same people in 1947 are the ones who started to kill each other.
No, you see, in 47, they suffered. I was born after 47, but in 47, they suffered together. Their pain was common, whether it was Hindus or Sikhs, and Muslims on that side, or Muslims on this side. They stood by each other. But in 84, I think we Hindus did a lot of damage to the Sikhs.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to
I'm not going into that, but I'm not comparing myself. But I'm saying
47. What I'm raising is a question, because when I was reading about Rasulpur, I was asking myself that here are these people, it's almost sort of like an idyllic village, and how realistic is this? Because why is it that we in 1947 in these villages of Punjab started killing each other? That's the question, really. And frankly, sorry, I think until a book is written which answers that question, I mean, and it will need to be a book like War and Peace, which finally brought peace of mind to Russia. We will not come to grips with partition.
well, yes, partition is one, but as I said, I've only heard stories or read a lot or seen one or two films. But for me, 84 was the breaking point. For me, it was the breaking point, whatever one might say, but that's a very personal feeling. And as far as you're using the word idealistic, you know, all these Hindus and Christians and Muslims stay together. Well, that was the atmosphere where I was brought up.
Yeah.
That is the atmosphere in which I was born.
Right.
There was a lady who's put into the book also, you know, she was a Muslim, but I did not know about it till I think I was about 35 or 40, but she used to come to our house, for a poor woman, but she used to come to our house every night without fail to have dinner and walk back to her house.
Yeah,
she was a part of her life.
And so, in my case, I grew up in a town called Lailpur, which is now in Pakistan, called Faisalabad now.
Yeah.
And that town, you know, all our neighbors were Muslims, and we are about to finish, my dear. And all I can say is, I was 4 years old, and I could never imagine the pain that I mean, I can't imagine. I lost relatives of mine in that thing. So I think that book has to be written. Maybe you, Ashok, you'll do it one day. Thank you.
So congratulations to Ashok Chopra for this lovely book. And do wait for your next book, hopefully next year at our Jaipur Literature Festival again. We'll just take a couple of minutes to add a couple of chairs on the stage.